Oh, here we go. Yes, it has. Right, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September briefing session. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay our respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge their continuing culture and contribution they make to the region. We have Councillor Jermaine Burke will be joining us online over to that side of the room. And apologies and leave of absence. We have a few apologies tonight. We've got Councillor Jenny Carter, who's on a leave of absence. We have Councillor Emily Wilding, who is an apology tonight, and Councillor Ken John, who is also an apology for tonight. I'll just check with the officers. Councillor Burke is not online yet, is that correct?
Not at this stage.
Not at this stage, okay, thank you. So she will join us when she gets a connection. Okay. Councillors, do I have any declarations of interest on any items on the agenda? No? Okay. So just as a quick announcement for council members and those in the gallery, that only matters relating to the agenda can be discussed tonight, and the ordinary council meeting is where ratepayers may question or ask questions about all manner of topics relating to the town. Number 5, item 5 on the agenda is statements. Now we have one statement from Simon and Rebecca Wilkinson. This is emailed in statement regarding item 12.8 Town Centre Area 2 Parking Review. I'll just very quickly read that out. As per the 2 targeted consultations in 2023 and 2024, there are 4 residents that don't have a driveway access in Kenny Street. The public continues to park all day in front of our homes to avoid parking fees and walk to the commute on the trains. I am currently undergoing treatment, and our Silver Chain nurses are having a very difficult time and having to park very long distances away from my property to gain access. Mr. Mark Luther at 24 Kenny on the 30th of July has also raised this issue with the town. We only wish to have permit parking on Kenny Street between Palmerston and Guildford Road to ensure, as residents, we can park and have access to the front of our properties. The time now is 8 a.m. and there are no parking spaces in front of my home, and I've just witnessed 5 people park their vehicles and walk to the train station. There is currently a 2-hour parking limit, not 200 metres from our home at the Guildford end of Kenny Street. Please consider our request to install parking permit in front of our homes in Kenny Street to allow us as residents access to our homes without the train commuters using the free parking for up to 8 hours a day. Thank you. Now, I understand Mr. Benjamin Clark was going to present a statement on the same item. Mr. Clark, would you like to come forward to the chair and, Councillor Polifka, could you have the microphone? That would be excellent. Thank you. So, usually about 2 minutes for a statement.
And absolutely.
So, welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, good evening, everybody. Look, I'm been Kenny Street for 24 years. I know that this particular subject of parking has been taking a fair while, and I just want to, reiterate some of those statements which has been presented as well, which I totally agree with. Within where I sit at 34 Kenny Street, it's changed a lot in that 24 years. I think obviously Bassendean is growing up a bit, and obviously a lot of people are sort of using that particular road for the station as an easy gateway for not paying on the other side of the railway line. And also us residents are also babysitting their cars as well. Obviously that's another angle of it as well. So it is becoming a little bit ridiculous. Most of these cars are there for most of the day, and even to point some people use them even for over 7 days. There's a car currently outside my home which has been there for over 10 days and hasn't moved. So it is becoming a bit of an issue in terms of parking and how people use that particular stretch. And also, just on the other side note, there's a particular parking area between 34 and 36, and I've highlighted this in correspondence with you guys, which is it's not actually designated with lines, and trucks and big four-wheel drives actually park there, and you can't even get out or swing out or get in. It's actually quite tight. So I can present some documentation if you want as well tonight to show those photos if you want me to, but I have that.
If you would like to leave that with the staff, what
Yeah.
can happen is that can then be distributed to all councillors, because clearly some councillors are not here tonight.
Sure. I've got some just to show photographically just exactly what they were talking
I
about
think
as well.
if we have that left with us,
Yeah,
we'll
fine.
actually get that out to all the councillors.
That's fine.
And many of the councillors who are not here tonight will actually tune into the live stream and hear your statements.
Okay, that's fine.
So, is that?
That is it. Thank you very much.
So thank you, sir.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, before I move on to question time, I'd ask if there's anyone else in the audience who'd like to make a 2-minute statement. No? Okay. So we'll move on to public question time. My understanding is that a gentleman did wish to ask questions tonight, but he has now chosen to do that next week at the ordinary council meeting. So I'd ask any other members of the public who are... Sir, would you like to come to the microphone and ask your question? You can ask up to 2 questions, sir.
Hi, Craig
Craig Lucanis.
Craig Lucanis, 186 West Road. First of all, this is with regard to the tree policy, which, I broadly understand and accept that there's a reasoning behind it. And first of all, I would like to know that all of the councillors received my written document regarding it. I don't know that I know that it was disseminated, but whether it was read or not, I don't know. So can I get at least an idea from the councillors who are here, which aren't many, but if that was received, or do I need to, because there's some questions associated with that.
So, Mr. Lucanis, you and I had a rather extended telephone conversation on this item. So, I'll just, if you don't mind, Councillor Burke is online now, correct? Okay. Can I just check, Councillor Burke? You can hear me, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, apologies.
No, that's fine. Councillors, the email that Mr. Lucanis is referring to, Mr. Lucanis, did it go to councillors or it went to mail out?
It went to mail out with a request for it to go to councillors.
And how long ago did it go there?
Towards the end of last week.
Okay. Councillors, have you received?
I can confirm that I have not received it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Craig.
Okay, well, I can't make a statement. I can only ask questions. I was going to ask questions in relation to it, so of the councillors. So I guess I may as well withdraw. I don't know why it would happen that it wouldn't have been.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Mr. Lucanis, I will allow you to make a statement. We've gone past statement time, but I'm happy for you to make a statement.
Okay.
I'm sure that the CEO will follow up, and that email will be distributed promptly once we've located. Mail out occasionally might have some problems, but let's leave that with the administration. But if you'd like to make a statement now or ask questions, I'm happy to.
Okay. Well, I'll make a statement because the questions would probably be better. We'll see. So the gist of what I wrote was with regard to the science relating to the heat island effect and the extent to which, or the applicability of it to, areas beyond the parts of the town where it has developed as a concern. I believe that the council should consider separating it out into, or looking at it in relation to density levels, rather than having a blanket council policy. The reason being that a tree one way or the other, more or less out my way, on R5 zones, and particularly next to the flats. Not that all R5 zone areas are next to the flats. It will make no difference to the heat island effect in the town, and particularly in the areas that you're concerned where it's having an effect at the moment. So that's the point. That was one point that I had written, and hopefully you'll receive that my written statement there before the next council meeting for your consideration. This second point, and is that the rules as they were written, and I understand they've now been revised regarding pruning, maintenance pruning, were very, very limiting. It wouldn't allow me to do any of the things I've done probably over the last several years in relation to maintaining my trees, because it had limited diameters that you were allowed to address and cut back. I'll reserve anything I've got to say about that till I see the revised policy. And finally, the fact of having a policy that is written, and in which my experience is that discretion is largely not exercised by the officers. And this is no reflection on Alex or Cameron or anybody I've had dealings with. Patricia, it is that when something's written down, it just seems it's black and white, and you either comply or you don't. And in the last year and a half or so, I've been involved in a subdivision application that has required some discretion, I believe, and ultimately discretion was shown, but it wasn't without having a large amount of my time and money spent on experts to make my case. And really, at the end of the day, the case they made was the case I was making. So I feel that that when something is written down, it becomes an article of faith that must not be transgressed, and discretion cannot be applied until the weighing in of experts. And I believe that common sense should prevail here in relation to pruning trees and to what trees should the treatment of them generally, of vegetation, particularly in areas like where I am, where obviously I value trees. I bought in the area because I value trees and the space, and so I'm not going to do anything to a tree that's untoward, because it's going to interfere with my life. I'll always try and work around it, which I've built my house so that it does work around trees. So anyway, I guess I'm going off into a bit of drivel there now, but I'm just making the point that once you make an LPP 13, once it's written down, it will be adhered to like glue, and there has to be some discretion allowed, because normal people shouldn't have to get experts in to deal with the trees that they have to live next to.
So, Mr. Lakanis, thank you. You effectively made your point. Did you want to ask a question as well while you're still there? No?
I would have, had I not learned that there's been some variation now in the way that.
Did you want to actually send those questions through, or have you already? Are those questions in the email that we are looking for? Yes, no?
No, they're not, because I would have asked them here. But I just learned that the policy has been varied, and I don't want to ask questions on the fly.
Okay. Did you want to send those questions through by email?
Yes.
So if you send them direct to our councillor email, you can just that's on the website. All our councillor.
I was looking for that, and I rang to find out where I'd find that, and she said, "Well, send it to me."
Mr. Lakanis, how about I send them to you?
That would be great.
Okay.
Including the updated proposed draft policy.
Okay. Mr. CEO, did you want to say anything? No?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lakanis. Okay, I will actually forward for all the emails so that you can actually send those questions through.
Yeah. And just may I finish by saying I don't wish to cast any aspersions on any of the officers of the town. My experiences with the officers I'm very, very pleased that this town has the officers that we do, because they're very, very good.
Thank you.
But they are bound by what's written on the pieces of paper, and that's what I'm on about here, about getting that right and making allowance where there are going to be, should be variations and relaxations.
Thank you, Mr. Lacasse. We are also very pleased with the officers that we've got. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I read that out as a statement. I've already read that out as a statement. Yes, no?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, so, there are no deputations, that here, so, another question? Oh, sorry, sir. I was so intent on the agenda, I didn't see you. Please do come to the chair. If you could introduce yourself.
Michael Dwyer for Harcourt Street, Bassendean.
How are you, Michael?
My interest is in the tree canopy policy.
Thank
I
you.
made a submission before the closing date, and I understood that my submission and everybody else who made a submission, that the officers would consider that and bring it to this meeting, the briefing.
Okay,
So
so I'll just explain. The briefing is a forum for councillors to ask questions and to receive advice on their questions. It's not a forum for debate. It's not a forum for making statements on the part of councillors. It is purely an informative session to ensure that we feel that we're adequately armed with information for the decision making, which will be next week at the OCM, the Ordinary Council meeting. Okay?
Very good, yes. I thought at this point I would be reading what the officers are advising the councillors of the policy. Or
Okay, so it's in the agenda. Okay, did you go online to actually look for the agenda, or?
I didn't look for the agenda.
Sorry?
I did not look for the agenda. I didn't
Okay.
realise I could access the agenda.
So,
Oh, well, I must probably saw it, but it didn't give me the details of what the officers' recommendations to council are.
okay, so I'm
But if
just,
that's available, I'll read
Okay.
that at a later.
Madam Mayor, can I maybe to cut through, and given we have some interest in this policy, it might be worth bringing this report first to the session tonight, and that way the people that have attended might be able to hear from the officer himself around the recommendation.
that would be excellent. So if you would like to wait, we will have this report up first so you can hear the recommendations from the officer, and we'll go
Thank
from
you.
there. Thank you, sir. Okay, so that completes question time. No deputations. We'll move on to question time, deputation statements, and so now we'll move to the officers' officers' reports. So I would ask our fabulous planning officer to come to the microphone and provide a report on 12.9, which is draft local planning policy number 13, tree retention and provision. Thank you.
No worries, thank you. So the purpose of this report is for Council to consider adopting a draft amended local planning policy number 13, tree retention and provision, following advertising. The policy was advertised for a period of 30 days, during which the town received 27 submissions. Of these, 10 were objections, 13 in support, and 4 were comments in response. Should be noted, in terms of the objections, all 10 were residents of the town, and of the submissions of support, only 9. So there was 4 outside of the district that also provided support to the policy. Key themes raised by those who object to the policy are erosion of private property rights, limitations on properties' development potential, liability and safety issues, and time and costs. These matters are discussed within the report. Following advertising, the town has suggested 2 minor modifications to the policy, including simplifying the definition of maintenance pruning and extending the exemptions to allow a neighbouring property owner to trim the tree back to the property line to prevent overhanging or encroachment of an adjoining property. There are 2 resolutions associated with this item, one being to adopt the policy and 2 to the second resolution to waive the fees associated with the applications for development approval for a tree damaging activity to a regulated tree, to encourage people to do the right thing. So Is any questions on the report?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillors, including Councillor Burke online, I'm opening this for questions of the officer. If you have any questions, Councillor Polifka.
Yes, just following on from what one of the community members had to say in relation to the urban heat island effect, and not necessarily suggesting that we would be relaxing tree protection measures in areas of lower density. Is there the possibility, having regard to state government policies, to increase the requirements for tree planting in the higher density areas, which seem to have less trees just by their nature, given that there's fewer deep soil zones and things of that nature? Are we able to have, I suppose, more stringent requirements for those higher density coatings?
Yep. So part of the policy does have tree provisions, which is seeking to vary the deemed to comply requirements of the R codes to set a higher standard for Part B and C under Volume 1 of the R codes. We still have not received consent from the department for those provisions. So part of the first resolution also is, if they do not support it, to remove those provisions 8.2 from the policy. In that case, it would just defer to the planning requirements under the R codes, to the deemed to comply requirements. So, in short, at the moment we're advocating for that. We haven't got consent for it, but we're trying.
In terms of putting this forward so that we do get the WAPC to accept it.
Councillor Polifka, can I ask you to move closer?
Yeah, at this stage, what willingness has the WAPC shown for coatings above R20, or are they looking to limit it to R20 and below at this stage?
Under the previous version of the policy, they allowed it to apply to up to, or essentially anything that was under Volume 1 of the R codes. The medium density codes were subsequently released in April of this year. We're probably one of the first policies that are seeking to vary or augment the deemed to comply requirements of that. They haven't provided any clear indication whether they would or wouldn't support it. And the previous advice to us when they previously supported the policy was it was support subject to the release of the medium density codes, and we'd need to kind of go back to them once the medium density codes were released. But yeah, we haven't received any clear indication yet whether or not they will or won't support the augmentation to the R codes.
So low density is not a problem. Medium density is still sort of the battleground as to what people are prepared to accept. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Just to pick up the other point that the community member had raised, and this relates to the amendments that have been made, and they seem to be quite sensible amendments in terms of what is and isn't permitted in terms of pruning and maintenance of the tree. To go to the community member's point, what would be required? Would a community member need to engage an arborist, or could they simply liaise with the town, or hopefully one day an arborist of the town?
In the first instance, we'd encourage them to liaise with the town, and like I said, hopefully an arborist of the town potentially, or even our parks and garden guys may be able to provide some high-level feedback to them in the first instance by having that conversation with the town.
Yes,
to determine if the extent of pruning that they're looking to do would or wouldn't be exempt.
So they wouldn't necessarily be put to their own cost, only if they, I suppose, wanted a view which was contrary to that which was put forward by a town-employed arborist?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask a question there. I haven't got the document open in front of me, but my understanding is if the pruning was adhering to the standards of less than 10%, does it require permission to do that? Because I thought it said somewhere that if it was less than 10%, which is the recommendation that when you're pruning to do less than 10% of the tree canopy, is that correct or not?
So that's under the advertised version of the policy,
Yep.
less than 10%. Staff have recommended that we do modify that definition of maintenance pruning even further, based on the community feedback from both objections and
Yep.
submissions of support, to simplify that and remove the 10% requirement and the diameter requirement of limbs, just to give greater flexibility to those who are looking to undertake maintenance pruning. It also aligns with the adopted City of Nedlands local planning policy.
Okay. And the other question I've got is, perhaps not 100% relevant, but are there properties that are not required, the tree provision clauses, are there properties in the town that are not required to adhere to those tree provision requirements?
In terms of under the draft policy and as the existing policy as well, Volume 2 assessments for multiple dwelling developments don't have the tree provision requirements because they set a pretty high standard already. So it will only be for residential that's subject to the medium density or low density codes is what we're trying for.
Okay, no, that's fine, thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Ames.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for bringing this, Alex. Question regarding to pruning to a boundary lot or boundary line. Would that allow a resident to cut the limb just at their boundary line or all the way back from the trunk? Because it might be a nice large bit of wood just sticking out from a tree that might not look very aesthetically pleasing. How is that going to be managed? Because I've failed to be able to find that. I know there's a boundary lot, a pruning sort of area, but where does that? Where can our residents cut the tree from?
Yep. It will essentially allow them. The exemption would allow them to cut it back to the lot boundary from their side of the land. It would save them having to go over to cut it back to the tree trunk. So it would be just to the exemption would be just to the lot boundary.
So it could not then be done from the trunk of the tree?
If they came to an agreement with the neighbouring property, I don't see why they couldn't do that.
Okay.
But for the purpose of the exemption, it would just be back to the lot boundary.
Okay.
Basically, what is accepted as common practice.
Yep. Yeah, that's no dramas then. And who would be making the decision if, or how is the decision made in regards to what is a regulated tree? Is that just a visual representation on site? Are drones going up to be able to get crown sizes and so on and so forth?
It's a little bit difficult at the moment because we don't have a list or a register of regulated trees, or that would meet the definition of that. Within the report, we have recommended that we investigate through a budgeting process to obtain that information. We actually got something just today, which is perfect timing, from Nearmaps, who is one of our aerial imaging suppliers, who have just released an AI tree canopy measuring model, which they can overlay in their, so they do in our area it's 6 flyovers a year. They can process the imagery, and it can be very specific to our area in terms of the radii of the canopy and the height of the tree. That's something that's just come out, and it would appear to be relatively affordable. So we'd be looking to investigate that further. We weren't aware of it until today when they sent it out today. So we'd obviously be looking at the LiDAR information from Landgate, but their 2020, or the most recent information from 2022 is still not released yet.
Sure.
So we would be relying on our aerial imaging and information that's publicly available to us.
Fantastic. And could I just have one more question, please, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Obviously, these new tree pruning regulations will be coming out. I dare say it would be important for our maintenance contractors within the town to adhere by this. We've seen maybe some aspects in the past where they may have not been pruned very aesthetically to some of our residents' standards. So these regulations will be passed on to our contractors, I would dare say so.
The suggestion would be that if the policy was adopted, we'd actually send it out to any known kind of arborist or tree removalist that we are aware that operates within the district, so they're aware of the policy.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, if there's no further questions, I do note that item 12.8 is also your item as well. Is it?
A further question?
Yep. Can I just ask Alex, is 12.8 your item as well?
Yeah. It's,
Okay. Well, we'll go to that one straight after, but I'll allow Councillor Plifka. Let's keep it quick, councillors.
Yeah, we've been talking about things which are exempt. So if something isn't exempt, a development application is required. At that stage, it would proceed in the same way as with a house, for example. So if somebody came to you and said, well, I've got a tree here, don't want that tree there anymore, but I'm going to plant these other trees elsewhere, So that would proceed in the same way, and that the town would assess what somebody's asking to do, and if there's a net increase in canopy, or is that sort of the test that would be applied when somebody comes seeking approval for something which isn't exempt?
Yeah, so when an application is lodged, would be assessing the application on its merits, the objectives of the policy, depending on the reason for it. We'd be looking to have discussions with them to try and design around it. But if there was no kind of way around the tree, we'd be looking to offset that as well through the provision requirements.
So that's the flexibility that
Yep.
people were concerned.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so councillors and Mr CEO, you don't mind if we move on to 12.8? Right, okay. So, all yours again.
All right, thank you. The purpose of this report is for council to consider the parking restrictions within the section of Kenny Street between Guildford Road and Palmerston Street. This is a continuation of the Town Centre Area 2 parking review and the report provided to council in February of this year, where council resolved to support further consultation with the owners and occupiers of this section of Kenny Street, with a survey undertaken if residents preferred no change or the introduction of permit parking. Of the 32 letters sent, the town received 4 responses, all requesting permit parking. Town staff have not recommended this based on the reasons within the report. The town does recommend, though, that a 2-hour parking restriction on a bay directly adjoining number 1 Kenny Street is relocated to exclude this bay, allowing the resident who is, based on our evidence, the only one appearing to park there, allowing them to park there, and install a no-stopping yellow edge line from the northern side of the crossover that services 34 Kenny Street to the northern, might have got that wrong, apologies, to the southern side of the 34 Kenny Street crossover to the northern side of the shared crossover between 36A and 36 Kenny Street. The small gap in the crossovers, which I believe the gentleman actually provided photos of earlier, alludes that there is room for a vehicle to park there, but there is actually insufficient room, so we'd be looking to make that clearer with a no stopping yellow lineage.
Okay, councillors, questions? Councillor Ames.
Just a quick one, and thank you, Madam Mayor. Reasons why landowners decline parking permits, solely for cost reasons?
Don't know. We just didn't receive a lot of interest from the respondents. Yeah.
Just on parking permits, I mean, how difficult is that? I mean, is that something that can just be attached to a rates notice or something?
So there is a process that we send out renewals every year. It's not financial year, we do it by calendar year. So we send out a letter towards about November, the rangers will arrange and we'll send out a letter and people can reapply for a permit. There's a scheduled fee, it's introduced, it's $20 for a new permit and I believe $10 for a renewal, or for a resident or visitor. I'd have to double check the scheduled fees, but there is a small fee associated with it.
I'll go again, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Are we having any dramas with waste services accessing residents' bins and that sort of stuff with parking in here? If there's any idea of that happening?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Ames. My understanding is there hasn't been a history of many issues. So there obviously is some residents are obviously placing their bins in appropriate locations, and there are obviously the gaps where the waste truck can collect.
Okay, sorry, I was just thinking I will move on from that, councillors. Unless there's further questions, Councillor Plivka.
Just one final question, just obviously this item's brought this street into focus. The crossovers there, are they sort of standard for the town, or some of them seem quite large?
I'd have to take that question on notice.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we thank you. Thank you, Alex. So, councillors, we'll go back to the beginning of the agenda, which is 12.2. Bassendean Local Emergency Management Committee meeting. Did we require a yes? Okay, Ms Brenner, you're...
Through you, Madam Mayor, it was a fairly straightforward and routine meeting. I don't really have anything to comment on, unless there's any questions.
And councillors, there's questions? No, there's no questions, so we'll move on from that one. 12.3 is the Audit and Governance Committee meeting. Again, Mr White, do you have anything to say about this one, or we'll just throw it to questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I think we can rest on the minutes that are attached to the report. Thank you.
So, councillors, any questions on this one? Okay. 12.4, which is the accounts paid. Again, normally I would ask that if you've got any questions about this, that you put them in writing to the officer, because clearly Mr White would have to look at the reference number and go back tracking to provide information. So, councillors, if there's any questions about accounts paid, could you provide them in writing to Mr White as soon as possible? We then move on to 12.5, which is the monthly financial report, which will be appearing in next week's agenda. So we now move on to 12.6, which is the electrical services, reactive, scheduled and minor works. Now, again, the attachment to this was confidential. So, councillors, if your questions relate to anything in the confidential section of the report, I will have to bump this one down into confidential. Otherwise, if you do have questions, if we could keep them to what is publicly available in the agenda. Councillors, no questions on this item? Did you wish to speak to this item?
Not necessarily. I'm happy to answer questions. They're basic operational contracts that are lapsing soon. So these are new multi-year contracts for both, and very similar sort of scope and specifications to what we currently have for both tenders.
Okay. Councillors, no questions? Okay. So we then move on to 12.7, which is the streetscape weed control. I think I will ask you to provide information on this one. And again, councillors, the attachment to this one is confidential. So if you do have subsequent questions that relate to the confidential evaluation report, we will have to go behind closed doors for that one. Otherwise, we will leave it with you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess the purpose of this particular tender is to present a report to Council with a summary of the tenders that we received for the provision of streetscape weed control for the town, and recommend appointment of contractors to provide the best value money to the town. Essentially, this particular service is split into two different portions, two different methods of weed control. One's around herbicide chemical control, and the other component is the steam weed control. Two separate, methods. Hence, the request was for submissions for both. There's no intent to change what we're currently doing around programming based on our weed management strategy that we have in place around frequencies. And the contract is for 2 years with the option of extensions.
Thank you. Councillors, other questions? Councillor Plifka?
So to summarise, that which was, I suppose, sprayed before will continue to be sprayed, and that was steamed before will continue to be steamed?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. So the program, I've got the program, months and frequencies. There's no intent to change. They're basically, to summarise, the steam weed control will be around the sensitive areas that we've previously nominated, primary schools, childcare, those sort of areas. Whereas the herbicide chemical will be basically every street in terms of curbing, footpaths, and some median islands.
Great, that answers it.
If I could ask a question which probably doesn't relate to the actual evaluation report, but given advances in weed control, is there anything on the horizon for the town in respect to looking at alternative methods of weed control. I'm assuming not, because this contract is for another 2 years, but I'm just curious about whether you know of anything that's on the horizon with different methodologies.
Unfortunately, I'm not. As per the strategy document that we have, it does talk about potential methods such as solar radiation. Obviously, there's obviously hand pulling and brush cutting, which is pretty manual. Mulching, but I'm not aware of any new sort of technologies coming on board. Having said that, we probably realise that the chemical or the herbicide spraying now has the technology has a sensor attached to it, and the sensor picks up where the weed is. So it should technically be just zapping that weed rather than just running all the way along the curb, for example. So that's a technology that's just come in, my understanding, in the last couple of years. A lot of councils are now using that particular technology with a contractor.
That's excellent. Thank you. Councillor Plifka, did you want to ask a question?
We have this technology being deployed,
Yes, we do.
and is there an estimate in terms of the reduction in the volume of herbicide that would be used?
Sorry, no, I don't have that figured. It might be quite difficult to find to get it. We could certainly contact the existing contractor that we're using to see whether they might have some figures. Happy to try and seek that information.
Yeah, a good news story like that would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, Madam, through you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
Hello, sorry. Sorry, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I just had a quick query in regards to, has there been any further consideration in regards to weed controls for public open spaces and wetlands?
Not really in the best position to answer that, I think. Obviously, this contract is purely hard stand weed control. I probably would need to seek some advice from more of an expert, such as the Executive Manager of Sustainability, and certainly happy to follow it up with a response.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Apologies, I was not looking at the screen at all, so apologies for that. Thank you. Councillors, I don't believe there are any motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 14, announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting. Are there any? No, okay. There's no urgent business I know of, Mr. CEO. So this will bring us to closing the meeting to the public. So I would thank the members of the public who attended the meeting tonight. We will now be going behind closed doors to deal with a confidential item. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.